We're live, and yes, for those of you that are going to leave a comment, and you should already, I know that the thumbnail is upside down. I now have to resend it to myself, which I didn't do before I logged on, and I can go ahead and do that now, but it's not going to be fixed until after this is over, but that's all good anyways. You know, it's for my Australian viewers. We are upside down. So we'll get that going. But at any rate, we are going to talk about more about camshafts and why I think I'm going to go down this road from now on and tell people that, hey, when you're thinking about camshafts, and we'll go over why I'm saying this. It's more than just every cam is a turbo cam, although we do have that in the background. But when we're thinking about putting cams, because I recently tested a bunch of cams. I tested the Sloppy Best cam and tested the Truck NORRIS cam and tested the Sloppy Stage 2 and a bunch of a handful of Elgin cams and the stock ones and all kinds of stuff. I tested them on the LS, and we tested them with the blower, that Ford Racing Roots blower. We tested them with a turbo. We tested them NA. I put up some videos with NITROUS and stuff. So it got me thinking that, again, let's keep this in the, let's keep it 95. I'd like to keep it 100, but I can't keep it 100. I can keep it 95. And actually that 95 is probably a lot more than that. But here's the thing that I get, and here's the thing that I really want to talk about tonight. We know that when you put a camshaft in, and it will work with the turbo, because we've talked about that a bunch. It does the same thing with a blower. It does the same thing with NITROUS. When you put a camshaft in, you get something. You get whatever kind of power curve you get, and then you elevate it with these other things. You elevate it with NITROUS when you activate the NITROUS. You elevate it with boost with a blower. There are some things that are changing with the blower. One is that the intake manifold, especially on this one, very short runner, that's going to change the curve all by itself. So changing the blower and the intake manifold predominantly would effectively change the NA curve, although we didn't run it with the NA. We didn't run it NA with that blower manifold. But what happens because having done this a number of times, when you run it with that blower manifold by itself, NA, what it does, it took all the runner length away. So it takes a bunch of mid-range power and sometimes all the way to the top. The nice thing is with the blower, it'll make power on the big end because there's very, very short runners. It honestly doesn't have enough runner length to have reflected wave that's effective in the RPM range. That 99.99% of these are even working. So if you have a 1 or 2 inch runner, you're not going to get very much. And it doesn't work better with a blower. It just does what an intake manifold does. And that's what we're going to talk about, because the motor does the same thing. And so what I want, and the reason that I want this is, we'll talk about the reason first. I'll tell you what, and then we'll tell you what I want. So the reason that I want what I want is because whenever I ask somebody, I get comments all the time and questions from the channel and from email and stuff on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. And so I get questions all the time about, hey, what cam should I use on this and this and this? And I don't remember one time yet that I've got a question about what camshaft should I use where it was an all-out thing, where their only concern was how much cam can I put in this and how much power can I make? Because we've talked about this many times. If it's a turbo application and then they have their turbo that they have, it's going to make that much power. Doesn't matter whether I give them a Stage 4 Summit cam or a torque cam from Brown Julie Racing. If you have 1,000 horsepower turbo on it, it's going to make 1,000 horsepower. It might take a little bit more doing to get there, and one of them might make 997 and the other one might make 1,011 or whatever, but it's going to be about 1,000 horsepower. To me, that's the same thing. The only time that that's not the same thing is if you're drag racing and you need another 100th or whatever. Then we can talk about that. But 1,000 horsepower turbo really is going to make that. So why don't you choose your camshaft not according to what kind of power you want to make, because it's already going to do that. Like I said, a little cam and then the biggest cam that will fit, those can both make the same amount of power. So you should choose your cam for something else. But the other reason that you should choose your cam for something else is because when people ask the question, they never ask, how much power can I make? Well, if you want to put, we got to go over the limitations. Do you have a stock bottom end with ring gap? Yeah, I got that. Okay, so you have a stock bottom end. We have a limitation on how much camshaft we can run. If you want to make the most power possible, you should put valve relief in it because we should put more camshaft in it. Because we're going to put a lot of camshaft in it and we're going to put a lot of boost to it. Those two things will go together better if you're trying to do 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower. If you're just trying to do whatever the turbo will do, and you have a turbo that's realistic for this kind of application for a junkyard LS, then you're not going to have a 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower thing. I think guys haven't tried to do that, and maybe some of them have even been fairly successful. You see guys that have run 30, 40 pounds of boost or whatever on these cammed stock bottom end motors, and they've made lots and lots of power. I don't know what that number is, but it's north of whatever I've done on the dyno. It's north of 1,500, I'm sure. Because if they're running 10 more pounds of boost, even if their NA motor wasn't making quite as much power, they're making a lot of power. Because 10 pounds of boost is a lot, especially when you have a motor, you have an NA motor that's making enough NA power where you're making 30 horsepower per pound of boost. So if you got 10 more of those, you can do some fairly simple math. It's a lot. But the thing is, in all of these questions that I've gotten over the years for the last 10 or 15 or 20 years, very, very rarely, like I'm sure I could count the number of times on one hand versus the number of times would be hundreds and hundreds that aren't on that hand. So I'm sure I could count on one hand the number of times guys have said, look, I need to make all the power that's possible. How much power can I make? First of all, I'm probably the wrong guy to talk to about that. You need to talk to Morris or Nelson or one of these guys that if you want 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 horsepower or whatever, you need to go to a guy that does that. That's not the kind of testing that I do, because it's all on one hand. There's so few people that are doing that or want to do that or can do that, that there are people that specialize in that. And that's very, very high end, very expensive stuff. That's not me. That's not what I'm doing. So the questions that I get are more, okay, what's the best turbo for my thing? Which is why I put the video up that I did on turbocharging or turbocharging junkyard LS motors. What's the best turbo? Okay, you shouldn't really be asking that question, because that's not really a question that you need to be concerned with. The first question you need to ask yourself is, how much power do I want to make? And when you tell me how much power you want to make, then we can start talking about your camshaft, because how much power you want to make is going to be dictated by the turbo. And now we need to stop thinking about the turbo. Same thing with nitrous. We need to stop thinking about nitrous, and we need to stop thinking about a supercharger. So get rid of, if you want to choose a camshaft, get rid of all of that, because every question that I get, short of those 2 or 3 or whatever that was on this hand over here, short of the all-out guy, there's always limitations. I have 1,000 horsepower turbo. I want it to be street driven. I want to use it with a stock converter. I want to use it with a 4L60 trans, which is a big mistake with any turbo. But and it's a tow vehicle. It's a street strip thing. I got to drive it every day. Whatever their other limitation is, but they still want to make good power. And as a side note, it's a fantastic time to be a performance enthusiast, because you can have all of that. You can have a serious driver motor that starts right up and drives around and does all that stuff and even idles well and gets decent mileage and can make really big power with a lot of boost. And because they have these limitations, we never pick the all of it camshaft. Even if we wanted to make lots of power and make 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower, we don't ever do that. So if we take that off the table, now the question is, how should we choose our camshaft? Well, you should choose your camshaft because you've already decided that I want a camshaft that I can drive with, that has to idle, that has to get decent fuel mileage, that has to work with my stock converter, if that's the thing. And maybe you put it has to work with a 2800 stall converter, whatever your thing is. I put gears in it. I've got big tires. I'm rock crawling. I'm doing whatever. So we figure out that thing, and that thing when you're choosing the camshaft for that thing, those number of things, that has nothing to do with the turbo, because whatever we pick to solve this problem, and there are more problems here than there are with the blower or the turbo or the nitrous, those things will just go on. So pick a camshaft that's going to solve all of these other NA problems. So when you're looking for a camshaft for your turbo, blower, or nitrous deal, think about it as not having that. Think about an NA motor. I've got an NA, I got a 5.3. I want it to drive. I can use a 2800 stall converter. I'm going to use 410 gears. It's going in a truck. I'm going to be doing some towing with it, but primarily it's going to be me taking my kids over and doing donuts on the way to get donuts or ice cream or whatever the thing is. Okay, so let's choose something that's going to do that. And then because you have boost on it, you don't really have to worry about the camshaft making lots of power. Put a camshaft in it that's going to help you make power, but it's not an NA motor, so you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be responsible for all of the power. It now can do other things and do other things much, much better because you have all of this excess. You have a 100 or 200 or 300 shot. You have 5 or 10 or 15 pounds of boost from your positive displacement blower, your centrifugal blower. You have 5 or 10 or 20 pounds of boost from your turbo. So making the power is going to be very easy. So now let's tailor the camshaft to do all of the other things as though those things weren't even there. So now what? Now pick your camshaft. Now what do you want it to do? Let's go over the list of things that you want. We pick a camshaft. And by the way, when we go over that, okay, I have this stall converter, I have this tire size. I'm going to be doing this with it. The vehicle is this kind of weight, has this kind of transmission. It's this motor, and I want to run kind of in this RPM range. I don't want to take it to 7,800. I'd rather have it be at 6,800. Okay, all of that stuff is good. When you do that, the other thing that you need to know is that there's not one camshaft that's going to do that. There's hundreds. There's lots of camshafts that will satisfy your needs. When I do cam comparisons and you see a cam comparison where one of them, I was just looking at, and the reason I bring this up is I was just looking at the sloppy best cam test that I did versus the truck NORRIS cam, or the sloppy stage 2 versus the truck NORRIS cam. And you see those camshafts do different things. One of them's, well, two of them are bigger than the other one. The truck NORRIS cam is a smaller cam. It's really, really good down low, up to 5,000 or 5,500, depending on which one of these that you're comparing it to. And then the other one, the other bigger cams, one's a 219 cam, one's a 228 cam. Both those are bigger. They're going to make more power on the top. That's all well and good if you were running up there. If all you were concerned with was, okay, I'm going to launch at 3,500, it's only going to be from 3,500 to wherever this is to 5,500 in first gear. I don't have to worry about that. I got lots of gearing. That's not an issue. And then it's going to be running from 55 to 75 or 55 to 7 or whatever the number is. So I can just use all of that top end power. That's fantastic. Then you'd want that kind of camshaft. But if you're not doing that, and also if you want your turbo to spool up, then you want the smaller camshaft. And so those are all things that you need to consider. But the bigger camshaft is going to make more power, more peak power, and less low speed power. But you would only know that if you saw comparisons done. Because if one of them makes 20 foot-pounds more at the bottom and 15 horsepower less at the top, are you going to be, well, you won't be able to tell that from behind the wheel in your 4,000 or 5,000 pound truck because you wouldn't have ever compared them back to back. You won't know that there's a difference. You will have only put one camshaft in and run that. So when you're doing that, you will be much happier with a camshaft that makes less power on the top than it does on the bottom because you're using that part a lot more, especially if you're doing these other things. If you're doing nitrous or you're doing a turbo or you're doing a blower, you should concentrate on having the camshaft be milder so that all of the areas that you're going to be driving around and you're going to be enjoying, you're going to enjoy. And you'll be able to enjoy all the power that you want. Because if it makes 20 less horsepower than the big cam on the big end, you just, if you won't even know, you wouldn't ever know that you're missing that because you wouldn't have ever done 2 camshaft tests. You would have put one camshaft in. You would have, if you wanted 1,000 horsepower, you would have turned the turbo up to 1,000 horsepower or put another 50 horsepower with a jet in the nitrous, whatever you want to do. And then you would have what you want. But when you're choosing that camshaft for these kind of combinations, you should think about it as it being an NA motor. Now, what do I want for my NA motor? Do I want a truck cam? Do I want something with chop? Do I want something? Do I want the biggest cam that I can fit in there? Some guys want that. How can I fit this stage 4 Summit cam in there? Can I fit this stage 4 Brian Tooley cam or Cam Motion or comp cams or whatever it is? Can I fit that? That's the thing that they want. Will this fit? Well, you're gonna have to measure it because I can't tell you that it fits in yours. If I have run it before, I could tell you what thing we ran it on and it seemed to work. That's all I can tell you. People want to guarantee, Richard, does this fit? I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you it's big enough. You should measure it. But if that's your thing and that's what you want, then you know going in that there are going to be trade-offs with that. Okay, I got the big camshaft. It's going to be soft down low. I probably will need gearing with it. It's not going to get great mileage, but it's going to charge hard on the big end. And that's what I want. That's what I'm all right now. That's what I'm all about. And that's what I want. And that's fantastic. And again, you should choose that based on the fact that that's what you want NA, and that's what you want the camshaft to do. And then when you run it, you're like, it charges real hard out to 7,000. I love it. And then it shifts. And now I'm going to add a 200 shot. And now it charges a whole lot better all the way to 7,000, because with 200 extra horsepower, it would definitely do that. And you know that because whatever power curve you made with that combination, you now have added 200 to it. So wherever your starting point was, you just added to that. So the moral of this story, when you're choosing your camshaft for a blower or turbo or nitrous, for 95% of the people out there, you should stop thinking about it as a blower or nitrous or turbo thing and just think about it as an NA deal. And with all of those power adders, I myself would probably tend to go milder and then use the power adder as the power. The one exception possibly be with most guys that want to run nitrous, unless they're running it just on the street and they want to have an extra 100 horsepower, 150 or whatever their number is. A lot of those guys want to make lots of NA power and then add nitrous to the NA power, because whatever you are making and you add to that, you're obviously, if you start higher and then you add some to it, you're going to end up higher. So a lot of times that's the way to go. With the turbo thing, that's not nearly, I mean, that does happen, but since you've limited yourself in the size of the turbo that you can have, you're kind of limited in the power unless you're doing, unless you're doing the 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower thing. Then you shouldn't be looking at this video to try to figure out what I should do to make 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower. That you should have that discussion with somebody else. So let's see what everybody's doing tonight. Tonight. I'm going to scrolling. Tim's here. Larry's here. What's up, Larry? Really, you're here? You were the second person here and you haven't already asked, like, where is the poll? Come on. Australia's in the house. Random question. What years is a Gen 4? Does anybody know what a Gen 4 started? A Gen 4 4.8? I'm thinking 2005 or 6 probably. Every cam is a lot of dirty work, Cam. Evening, everybody. Car peeps. Oh, man. Come on. Yeah, thoughts is not a word here. We don't use that word. That's banned. We are live. Admiral's here. Casey, but I make it more direct in the second half of my question. Richard, a well-built 460 can hold a lot. Admiral swearing by the 460. So if you guys want 460 information that can hold a lot of power, you need to talk to Admiral. Have you seen Coates Engineering spherical valves? The rotary valve stuff I've seen, if that's what you're talking about. That was at SEMA many times. Stock bottom end, NA only, economy, daily driver, street racer, quarter miler, supercharger, turbo, twin charger, or twin turbo. Is it a... Okay, Daryl, let's start over. How much power do you want? How fast do you want your car to be? Forget about what you're doing with it. You have a stock bottom end, and now how much power do you want to make? If you tell me how much power you want to make, we'll tell you how to do that. Cars and coffee and donuts. That's right. Planning on running a truck NORRIS cam with a 2800 stall. Is how much power can be realistically made with a ProCharger, and what gears would you recommend? The engine is an 87 Z28. That's a tune port motor. Do you have a different? A truck. Let's see. An 87 Z28 is a tune port motor. You can't put a truck NORRIS cam in a tune port motor if that's what it is. Did you swap an LS into that? So I maybe need some more information, because a truck NORRIS cam is an LS cam. Don't forget to find the hit and thumbs up button, everybody. Eric is otherwise Eric's going to get mad. Porsches and pastries. How much boost is safe with stock ring gap? 3 pounds. Will an ASA cam work with a ProCharger on 6-liter? Yes, it won't leak boost out. Dan, are those pasties or pastries? Did drive a 76 911, which had been converted to Weber's once, though. Have you ever ran the Texas Speed Cletus McFarland cam? I don't think I have. What do you think about a Magic C3? I've never tested one. If you told me the specs on it, I could probably tell you what it would do, though. On the positive displacement supercharger, I've seen less overlap is a little better. Why would that be? Most of the positive displacement blower cams, like the factory LS9 cam, is a really good example. It has a really wide LSA. I think, if I remember right, does it have any overlap? If it does, it's only 1 or 2 degrees. I don't. It may not have any. But there are all kinds of cams that have overlap that will make way better power than that camshaft, and they'll not only will they make more power, they'll make more power everywhere. That blower will actually like overlap. It doesn't allow it to escape. That's not really a thing. What's going to be the biggest difference between asymmetrical and non-asymmetrical cam? Are you talking about the load profile, or are you talking about a difference in intake lift and exhaust, difference in intake duration and exhaust? Oh, there you go. Getaway, thanks. Don't forget to switch to live chat. We're live. It's all the way live. I got to scroll back down, though. I ran 7 pounds a lot in my Mustang, and it worked fine. I even ran it in a Silver State. I just don't know well, take that back. We may have not have run the blower until I put the Weisco pistons in it. And then we probably would have opened up the ring gap. Corge is here. Man, I can't wait to get that 2.2 going. Gen 4 started in 05. Early the guys was done when you didn't have any money. Could afford new seals. Could only afford new seals. Is knurling the valve guides a bad idea after a certain power level? Yeah, that's not really something that people do much anymore. Waiting for the K-Series Big Bang. Kyle, there's no stupid questions. You chopped a 6-cylinder twin scroll manifold down to 4 cylinders. So is it have you just taken 2 cylinders off, one off of each side, so that now that it's a 4-cylinder twin scroll? Boss, so you have a 4.8 in your 87 Z28. Okay, that makes more sense. So 4.8 with a truck Norris cam. And then now I don't remember your question. I'm going to scroll back up, though. I'm going to see what it is. We're going to get you hooked up. How much power can be made with a Procharger? Well, what Procharger are you using? Because the different Prochargers are capable of different power levels. A D1SC can be 1,000 horsepower. An F1A94 can be 12 or 1,300. So it depends on which one you're using and how fast you want to spin it. A 4.8 with a Procharger could make, with a cammed 4.8 with a truck Norris cam, you could get up near 1,000 horsepower if you had the right supercharger on and you had good gas in it and intercooler and all that stuff. So we need a poll for tonight. Polling. Start a poll. Pow. Okay, I don't if I hopefully you guys have seen the video that I put up a long time ago. I had a 3800 V6 that I ran, and I made an adapter plate to put a Kenny Bell on it, a twin screw on it. It was a small one, it was a 2.1, but a lot bigger than an M90 was. And so my question is, I'll probably get another motor, but we won't use the Big Bang one. But should I put a Kenny Bell on a 3800 V6? We'll ask our community. I think it needs to have an inner core. TSP Magic Stick, a 238, 242. So that's a big camshaft. Well, I don't know that that will fit stock piston to valve clearance. How big of a converter would you recommend for an LY6 for a 238, 238? With the 238, I'd want to make sure that it even fits, especially on a 110. 238 on the intake with a 110. I don't know that that's going to fit stock piston to valve clearance. If you have enough room for it, why would you go with a single pattern on that? I can't wait for 2.2. No pressure, though. There will be pressure. There will be boost. There'll be plenty of boost. And the 2.5, right? Are you typing on a typewriter? No, it's the what is the I'm a stenographer. Can you put a 671 on the 3800? Well, I mean, anything is possible, obviously. If not, then a 471. Yeah, that would work. I'm worried about the width on those. What's a good NA cam for a 4.8? Again, it depends on all the other things that you want to do. Do you want to make lots of power on the top end? Because you're going to have to. It's a 4.8, so it's going to have to rev anyways to make power because they're little. You can take a look. I've got some good 4.8 things up there. We ran a 224 cam that was pretty good. Probably run. I don't know if I've run something bigger than that yet. The hot rod cam was good. I think we ran in there. We ran the truck NORRIS cam in the 4.8. I think we ran the sloppy cam in the 4.8 also. Scrolling. Please do put a Kenny Bell on it. Yeah. What sort of cam would be ideal to help with a large turbo spool up on a Gen 3 Hemi? So how big is the turbo? Because I've run 1200 horsepower turbos on the Gen 3 Hemis. I'm trying to remember what camshaft we had in it. It was like an LS cam. It was 230 something at 50. Did the sloppy best cam require it does require springs. The push rods, I can't remember whether or not we replaced them. I think when we were doing it, I think I remember the length being different between the two cams that I ran, I think. But you should always check that when you're putting your camshaft in and you're putting your push rods in and putting your rockers onto the push rods. You should count the number of turns to see how many it takes, and then you'll know whether it's too long or too short. What's a good top end cam for a 5.3? Something that has 231 degrees or 232 or 233 degrees of intake duration is where you're going to be starting at for that. That's getting up near the available piston to valve clearance for a stock bottom end, if that's what you have. I think I ran one of the fairly good sized Summit cams on a 5.3, and then we've run that 469 comp cam, and then we just ran the red hot cam and the hot rod cam, and that's the hot rod cam is one I would look at on a 5.3. You have a 94 103 on a 6.4. So what else is done to the motor, and what kind of power are you trying to make? My guess is if you selected that turbo, you're not really that concerned with boost response. This has got to be a race motor, right? LSA 6.2 got a better cam than the LS9 cam that gives stock like idle, so no one can tell it's cammed. Yes, there are better choices than that cam. On a 6.2, the truck NORRIS would, well, that's maybe not that one. That's going to sound a little bit cammy, although not very much on a 6.2. Joel, so you're trying to make 1400. That's more than enough turbo. A 94 should be more than enough turbo to do 1400. But I honestly don't think you need very much camshaft in a 6.4 Hemi to do that with. Something that's probably 225 or 230 at 50. If that will fit, I don't know. I don't know what your piston to valve clearance looks like. A 471, 371 and 471 and 671 are not the same size. They might be the same width. Yeah, the length is different though. Eric, what was your question? I'm trying to scroll back, but I don't see it. I'm still not seeing it. I don't see your question. I want to replace the timing chain by wondering if I have to lift, pull the engine to get the pump out of the way. I don't know what that is. Eleven and a half to 1 compression Hemi 426. Is it okay to boost? Is it, what Hemi is it? Is it a Gen 2 Hemi? Is it a Gen 3? Oh, okay. It is a Gen 3 Hemi base 420. Why are you drag racing the thing? Why would you want 11 and a half to 1? Do you have really good gas for it? I'm hoping if you're running boost and trying to do a 94 millimeter turbo on an 11 and a half to 1 motor, I'm hoping you're running at least running E85. Let's see. How's our pole doing? How's our polio doing? Should I run a Kenny Bell blower on the 3800 V6? 88% are saying yes. And then all the no's, you guys are no longer invited to the party. Richard, can you tell me anything about a 2.9 Whipple on a 4.8 liter? I have a 4.8 with a 2.9 Whipple videos up on the channel. So you can take a look and see what they did, what that blower did. Aaron's here. I'm glad you clarified your every cam is a boost cam statement. Not just now, I clarified every time I state it and have for years and years and years, because that's not something that's new. You see, we were talking about max effort race engines. I know that's a very, very small segment of. I'm talking to junkyard people, not dedicated racers that are trying to run 1-inch lift cams and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, not so good gas octane. I want a supercharger for sand dunes racing. Then I don't recommend it. Eric, on the L33, I'm wanting to replace the timing chain and was wondering if the oil pan has to be dropped down to get to the oil to get the oil pump off the crank snout. Yeah, I always have to drop the oil pan to get the oil pump and the pickup off. Country life. I don't know what your question is. Richard, when you're going through the steps to add ring gap to a Gen 4 5.3, would a simple dingle ball clean up enough of a cylinder wall change to warrant new rings? No, we've done it both ways. We've run new rings on an old bore, and I've run old rings on a new ball honed one, and it didn't seem to change anything. I know everyone's going to yell at me for that, but we've done it, and it worked just fine. So I wouldn't change the rings. If you want to put new rings in and it will make you feel better, then you can. Just know that we, on at least one of the Big Bang motors, I ran a ball hone through it and then just reused the rings. Eight out of 9 people want to make it. we're at 89%, so 9 out of 10. There are 271s and 371s. I knew about the 371s. I don't know if I've ever seen a 271. Wallace Racing has a chart for all of the GMC blowers. If you guys haven't been, you need to go to Wallace Racing. They have everything there. I recommend it for everybody. Which is easier to tune with stock computers, return style or returnless style? I don't think either one of those are going to make a difference for a tuner. If the Dodge 2.2, 2.5s are limited by head flow, what could the advantage be to run a 2.5 to be run a 2.5 instead of a 2.2 instead of a 2.5? You've seen guys switch to from a 2.5 down to a 2.2. If they did do that, it's probably because they wanted to make power at a higher engine speed, which they then could use different gearing with, maybe. That's the only thing I could think. The 2.5 is going to make more average power. It's just if you got to a point where you clip the amount of power you could make because of head flow, although that would become less of a thing with boost, but you could run into that at some point. I've run 30 over rings on a motor that measured 35 and it was okay. And I can be fine a ball hone and run standard rings. They should have put a master link in the timing chain. That'd be nice. That would make life a lot easier. Is a 222, 230 cam too small for a 426 6.4 base stroker Hemi? Not with a big turbo on it. It wouldn't be too small. If you're trying to try to run a blower on it, I'd run a bigger cam than that. I bought a BDS 1071 plus water intercooler for ice water. That's good. Running gas. Will intercooler help make intake temp enough for more than 25 horsepower? Do you mean will the intercooler add 25 horsepower? Is that what your question is? Very few 2.2s have gone faster than Reeves in his 2.5. Yeah, I think that it depends on what the average RPM that you're running in. I I know guys will want to talk about that, and there's maybe some kind of argument to be made there, but I haven't yet seen the bigger motor be beaten if there is not a class rule against it. Is there any use for iron 6-liter heads? Maybe some class guys want to use those. I've seen guys that have a limit for their circle track things where they have to use an iron head, and that might be a good, because that's a really good flowing head. I meant for NA power. Yeah, I don't. That's probably not enough camshaft, Hashim, for that size motor. I would put something bigger in it, especially if it's at 11.5 to 1. Special Agent Richard, a friend and I are working on a heavily used motor that has 15 thousandths of crank thrust play. That's a lot. Can you put a I'd be interested to see if is that all that wear on the bearing, and then why is it worn that much? I was wondering what's the most you've seen on a motor. Honestly, I don't remember. I have to be honest, on a lot of these big bang motors, even though we've taken them apart and put new ring gap in them, I honestly don't even remember checking the thrust on them. When we put together new ones, obviously I always do that, but I just figure if they were running and they were all running when they came apart, so that they were okay. But normally we would want to see, like, I don't know, 4 to 6. I try to check in when I can. Yeah, B-dub. 1071 on a 540 big block, hoping intercooler will help me run more timing. It should. I've seen some with wiped out thrust faces have a 1/4 inch of play. Yeah, it would be cool if you have 15 thousandths thrust on it and you put a new bearing in that most of the wear was on the bearing, and you put a new bearing in and now all of a sudden it's within spec. Just check and see if the thrust face on the crankshaft is bad. The 2.2s do have a forged crankshaft, but I haven't seen a cast 2.5. Yeah, they don't break the cranks on those with boost, and they're not running at a million RPM on them either. I have a forged crank in the one that I have in the Omni, but I don't really think it's necessary. In fact, we talked about that when I was at the car farm. That's one of the tests we wanted to do. I would like to test the cast versus the forged crank, because the forged crank is quite a bit heavier. So I'd like to see what change that makes. I mean, all of that weight, or most of the weight, is pretty close to the center line of the crankshaft. I know it's out farther away, but it's not as far as the piston stuff is. So I don't know how much of a change in moment of inertia it would have, but it might be enough to have a measurable change in power. It would be interesting. Poured in polish 799s on a stock LS1 with a Scoggin-Dickey Performance Center Power Max Plus camshaft, LS6 intake running E85. What else is there to get more power out of it besides a little bigger camshaft? I don't know what that Power Max Plus camshaft, I don't know what the specs are on that. But do you have an LS6 intake? So that's pretty good. I mean, a fast intake would make more. Depending on the specs of that camshaft, a bigger camshaft. As long as your heads were ported correctly, I'm hoping that you have long tube headers in it. Is the intercooler necessary with the E85? I like to have both. Nissan Sentra manuals with a thrust issue would stop running when the clutch was depressed. Measured 250 on one. Wow. Did you ever get a hold of David Visor? Yeah, we've talked for a long time, as we always do when we start talking. My kids are watching with me. Say goodnight. Time for bed. I'm always on the lookout for a cast common block 2.2 crank at the yard. Rare birds, yeah. E85 needs no intercooler. I think it does. I think a blow through E85 needs an intercooler. I think that they all do. I've heard guys say the 2.2 forge crank runs smoother. Yeah, and I don't know what those things mean. I've had a couple of guys say things to me trying to describe something like that, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't really know what that means. Like, if you tell me it makes more torque at 2,800 RPM, I know what that means, but I don't know the thing that you're describing. I can't quite put like my a tangible meaning to that. Intercoolers for everyone, especially on a 2.2. They need a lot of intercooler. They need an air to water with ice water. How big of a shot could I run on my Cam bolt-on LS1 C5? Do you know how much power it makes now? We ran a 300 shot. This will give you an idea. We ran a 300 shot on a 5.3 with a stock heads. I didn't change the ring gap, which I should have. A camshaft, and not even a very big one, and a carbureted intake manifold, which essentially did nothing to power. Victor, yeah, if it makes 400 wheel, you're making way more than we did on the 5.3 that we had a 300 shot on. Yeah, Vizard he's a sharp guy. He's done a lot of stuff. I run an intercooler with M1 air to water and have gains to prove it. We know it makes power. It definitely does. I mean, if you and guys the guys that are running M1 are usually the guys that are in the 30, 40, 50 pound of boost club. And that's where an intercooler is really going to come in handy, especially an ice water one. Because if you can bring your temperature down from 400 degrees going in to 100 degrees, which would be really easy to do with a good air to water. Because I know I've seen it done. I've seen Mahovitz do it on the crazy stuff that he runs. So that's just nothing but good. The argument against running an air to water intercooler on drag race stuff where you're running M1 is not that it doesn't work. Does it work enough? Does it gain you enough to offset the weight of all of that system? Because drag racers are obviously very worried about weight. And if you can't offset that with the added power, then it doesn't make sense. But it also adds a safety factor, I think, also. You don't know how bad an engine shakes till you run solid motor mounts. I did make the mistake of deciding that I wanted solid motor mounts on my 5-liter Mustang. I was thinking it was going to shore up the chassis and make the thing handle better. It did make it vibrate a lot. And then when I threw in, we had roller bearing front control arms too, which without the bushing material in there transmits a lot of road noise into the car. You should run a Kenny Bill on 3800, but to be honest, it's been done. I know it's been done because I did it a long time ago. Torque Tech just released a new kit to run 09 Shelby blowers on a 462 valve as of last week. Should be interesting to see the numbers come out. Yeah, we know what those blowers do. So as long as you have enough motor, there you can take advantage of that. I always thought you'd keep the crankshaft or reciprocating assembly as light as possible. It depends on what your goal is for the engine. And the goal of a factory OEM application might be a smooth running motor. And it might be that during the initial stages of learning about what they had to do to make a turbo motor work, maybe that was part of it. Maybe that's part of the learning thing. And maybe after they realize, hey, look, this is never going to break. We will never break a steel crank. Oh, but it's a turbo motor. We got to put a steel crank in it. maybe they realize that, hey, this is not going to hurt itself. And if it does, it's because somebody, put a Granger valve on it and made it run 20 pounds. Yeah, Dan, it was a really bad idea running solid motor mounts in a street car. It's not good. Although, in my defense, it was also a race car. I did run it in SCCA events and out at the Silver State and all kinds of things. But, I also put stickers on and stuff so that it would look cool. $570 lift, 220, 222 exhaust for the cam. Challenger. I don't know which cam that was now. I don't remember what the question is. I get like 10 questions away and then all of that goes up. The Scoggin Dickey one. Okay. Yeah, there's much bigger cams that you could put in that to make more power. A 222, 220, or 220, 222 is not a very big camshaft. You have another 10 degrees of duration, and I'd run a much bigger split than that too. 231, 247 kind of thing. I did like the one thing I really liked about the roller bearing control arms. It's something that came from when we were doing the World Challenge with the Mustangs with guys from Bear Racing. So a shout out to Hal and to Bart, who did the fabrication stuff. Bart's awesome. But the roller bearing controllers were very cool because it was very nice just to have if you've ever had bushings on a Mustang control arm or even Delrin stuff that when you replace that with inserts, there's a lot of stiction there, which essentially is spring rate. If it's resistance to movement, and the roller bearing control arm just moved freely. It was really nice. So Casey, you think that BW, you think that the Forge 2.2 cranks were a result of EFI limitations in the early day? Has anyone ever seen a 5-0 split on the dyno? I've not seen one break on the engine dyno. Only in drag racing. Let's see where are we at. I'm still at 87%. Yes, everything needs a bigger blower, right? $480 doesn't fit in many small stock transmission tunnels. It is pretty big. Need to modify or build a new transmission tunnel. Ideally, you'd have zero stiction. I know. And it would only operate in its pre-described arc. Hopefully you got the arc right. I want to take my Iron 454 LS5 out of the Winnebago and into a shell of a Chevelle. Nice. Might need to be gone over. I really want to get a Chevelle. I think if things work out next year, maybe some kind of cool Chevelle. Ever tested, I've been around a 427 camera. I've been around them, but I don't remember them running one. If they did run one at Westech, it wasn't while I was there. I remember going to Ford Power Parts a lot, and they had a couple of them there. They were very cool, but I've never seen one run on a dyno. Eric, this is the greatest source of information. Well, that's because you guys are all bringing it here. What turbo would you put on a 1.8 liter Miata? How much power can it make without blowing up the motor? I don't know. There was a Grady kit that they did for the Miatas way back. I think it was a 1.6, but something small. I would just use something that we had run on the Honda stuff, even though the 1.8 or the 1.6, they don't make the power that a Honda B series does. But it's a good place to start out with. But so some sort of little T3, T4 hybrid would be good. The Disco Potato probably might work on that. Chrysler engineers could push things hard without a safety factor for today's system with forged cranks and rods and a squirmy little early block. I know I'm wondering how things are going to work on this 84 that I'm doing, because it has the stock head bolts and stuff. So we'll see if everybody's right about, oh yeah, you need to drill those out and put big head bolts in it. Larry been lurking and working. Nice. 66 is one of my favorite Chevelles. I want a 70 to 72. I like the 69s too, but a 70 to 72, I think, is what I like. My wife loves those too. If you pick up a Chevelle, will you do chassis dyno videos with it? I could. And I'm going to do chassis dyno videos with the Z and with the Mustang also. Will an ASA cam work with a centrifugal supercharger? Yes. No, it won't bleed off boost. GT28 RS, that would work. One of my good friends' dads has a few he has a few of them still in crates. Did Brule ever run his boat motors? Yeah, he did. The one that he drag raced, he ran that. I think it was a 475-inch big block that he had. How many seconds full on with the 300 shot? I'd have to look back and see how long it was on for. Let's see. It's not something I'd recommend. We were just in a contest, so we had to see how much it would go. And that's what we did. So we didn't care about the motors. They were just junkyard motors. So let's see here. I also ran one of them with full timing and it survived. It survived-ish. The high horsepower stuff was only on for a couple seconds. I think the 100 shot was on a lot more than that. Yeah, a few more. We were just looking for a big peak number. We weren't running it like we were running it in the quarter. Richard, I've seen Calvin's Ameribear teardown. I talked to Calvin the other day. I haven't seen that. David Vizard put out a new video tonight where he uses angle bolt main caps on a 5-liter. Did he drill the block or something to make that happen? But that's all nice, but that's not where they break. They don't break going down that direction. It's not a main cap problem. Is Milo's name short for Milodon? No, it's from a character in a book. My buddy has a new K-car spare motor sitting in his garage when his dad used to drag race his Rampage back in the day. I'd like to have a little Rampage truck. I think I'd want one with a 2.2 or a 2.5 turbo motor in it. A swap thing, ideally, would be cool just to be able to drive around. We've run girdled blocks on them before, and they'll still split going upward. The girdle just holds everything in place after the block breaks. I run a Garrett 2867 on my 1.6 in the Mini. The Mini is also going to be making more NA power than the Miata probably does. 330 wheel horsepower, 22 pounds. '75 Supreme velour. Yes, it does have crushed velour. Got a question. I have an L83 at Texas Speed Stage 3. I don't know anything about the Texas Speed cam. And you have a high ram on the L83? I don't know what that cam does. I've never seen a high ram test on an L83, so I don't know how well the heads are ported, so I don't really have any idea. Does the exhaust port on a turbo need to be of a certain length for flow, or just get it out and get it away? I've seen so many face it forward, straight up, front of the tire, behind the tire. The exit out of the turbo doesn't need to be a certain length. You don't want it to just end in atmosphere. So I guess you should have some kind of length. Most people are just getting it over to get it out of the engine compartment, like over off into the side, a fender exit or hood exit, because you don't want it exiting in the engine compartment. So whatever was needed to make that happen, and it needs to be as big as possible. You think an inner chiller would be a worthy upgrade for a standard water to air on an 8 psi guy? What is the inner chiller versus is the inner chiller the thing that does it ahead of time, or is the inner chiller the thing that sits in a Holley high ram? I don't know what that is. I guess I should look that up and so I understand what people are talking about. Inner chiller, what is this? No, I don't want to do any of that. Is it the thing that uses the AC? If it's the thing that uses the AC and you're running a street car at 8 pounds, I wouldn't worry about it. Back in 82, I missed out on a camera motor that needed to be rebuilt. They're asking $600. Yeah, that's pretty cheap. Let's see here. Am I familiar with Todd Warren cams? I haven't heard that name. What happens if there's no lobe separation? If the intake and the exhaust are opening at the same time, the motor's not going to run. I have not tried the new Edelbrock 4150 carb yet. Westech has some, so I can't run them if I run another carbureted motor while I'm down there. The camera was never used in a production car. Should I run the Kenny Bell blower? We're going to end the poll there at 85% saying yes. They were just crate motors. They were not ever used in a production car. They were immediately banned. Does more intake duration make a turbo spool later? Not specifically the intake duration. Whatever the cam does, what you want the cam to do, what you want the cam timing to do, and you can adjust different parts of your cam timing to do that. If you change the camshaft and the camshaft makes more low speed power, then the turbo will spool better. The cameras were banned from NASCAR. Everybody started making super double throwdown motors to to make lots of NASCAR power. Or they kept the big inches of the late 60s and early 70s. They were just going too fast. Although when they said, okay, well, you can only use 358-inch motors, they're like, oh, good. Wait till you see what these things are going to make. Why is compound turbo not a thing in the V8 world? Primarily because it's not really necessary on a gasoline engine, not on a gasoline V8. You already have enough displacement and NA power output to spool up really big turbos, and so it's not really necessary, especially not for any kind of street motor. They were banned from NASCAR, but they were used in drag racing. Yeah, they did use them a lot in drag racing. Yeah, the Brule was showing me the Edelbrock carburetors the last time I was down there, and they were pretty cool. I want to take a look at them, and we'll try to do some testing on them. I'm just was trying to figure out what exactly I want to test on them. We can put, I guess, a 950 versus a 950 Holly, an XP, or something like that, and see. But if we jet both of them, I honestly don't expect to see very much. It might be better to talk about all the features that each one of the carburetors have, because they are different. So it would be kind of cool. Yeah, no, compound turbos do look cool. And on that note, it is time to go. I've been here an hour and 6 minutes already. So it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. Hopefully I will be seeing you tomorrow, and I'm hoping to get down to do some testing here pretty quickly. I want to assemble that 2.2 and get it on the dyno, and then I'm going to do some spark plug testing too, because, you know, got to have those E3s, right? Thank you all for showing up. I'll see you all tomorrow morning.